Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Shea Anything podcast. Doug Williams and Keith Hernandez with you. Once again, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We are happy to get a rating or a review or a subscription, wherever we can get them. So we'd appreciate it. You may not be able to see this, but we got a Haji cameo here as I'm speaking.
He's just been meowing all morning. He wants outside, and I'm not going to let him outside. Okay, pal, go ahead. Don't let me interrupt.
It looks like this is the first time that we've done this. This is our usual time, but I feel like I'm interrupting breakfast today. Did you get a late start?
I got a little toast. I've been sleeping later. It happens every year. You know, just the season wears on, and this has been a short season. But the fact that I'm driving in every day, there's no break on a road trip where you just take a bus to the ballpark. And I got that hour and a half drive. I'm not complaining. But I'm tired. It's worn me out.
Man, it's starting to get cold where you are, I'm guessing.
I'm not, in my 20s like you.
Yeah, that's true. I'm hanging on to my 20s. I got another like 6 months, and then and the big 3-0. Well, since we last spoke, Mets are 1-1 against the Phillies. They were off Monday, and they're 2 games into the 3-game set. It's pivotal. It's another Waterloo, Keith.
Yeah.
It seemed like, honestly, after they lost game 1 of this series, I kind of wrote their playoff chances off. I thought they needed to sweep, and then they win an improbable game where Jacob deGrom has to leave the game. His leg was cramping up, so he leaves, and somehow Michael Wacha kept them in it, and they ended up winning. Clutch hit by Jimenez. We'll talk about some of those things later on. Let's start off, though, with a little reaction revisited from last night in the booth. Tim Britton of The Athletic happened to grab this and tweeted out this quote from you, Keith. Let's take a listen.
How do you go in a batting cage and pull an oblique? How do you tell the manager you did it?
When you're in the game. I mean, it's not like he was preparing for a pinch hitting opportunity, talking about Kyle Garlick. Yeah. He was already in the game, and he was in the cage between innings while the Phillies were batting, and that's where he pulled the oblique.
Well, I tell you what, I'm just look back on my career. I'm so glad I never did a sit-up.
That's... Oh, boy. How about since you stopped playing?
So no sit-ups for you in your career, Keith. You were somehow able to maintain a very successful big league career without chiseled abs, or did you have them and you just didn't need to do sit-ups in order to have chiseled abs?
When you play every day, I mean, I used to always start every season around 10 pounds overweight. I always played at 203, and I would start the season at 210, around 7 pounds. And, it's like a bear hibernating. You got to have a little body fat. So by the end of May, playing every day and getting into June, you got no body fat. And I didn't want to whittle down to nothing at 203. How much could I lose? And I'd have nothing in the tank for August and September. So I was taught that by old veterans when I was a young kid coming up, just to pack a little extra but be in shape, but just don't have your playing weight, because you'll get there playing every day. As far as sit-ups, I hate sit-ups. Always have hated sit-ups. I played football where you had to do them, and the coaches were too many coaches where you couldn't sneak and not do it because there were too many coaches watching. But in baseball, they'd walk by, and the minute they'd walk by and their back was to me, I would just lay down. And as a result, I never pulled an oblique.
I remember from football, did you used to have to do that thing where the coaches would tell you to lift your feet? You'd be lying down on your back. They'd say, lift your feet off 4 inches from the ground, 6 inches from the ground. And that's a huge ab exercise, and it's really painful. Football
leg raisers.
Yeah, leg raisers, yeah. Well, Keith, I still don't understand why people don't look at like the body of somebody like Jacob deGrom, who's in great shape and a great athlete, obviously, and realize that like that is the successful pitcher body. And people like Noah Syndergaard, who are always in the weight room, struggle with muscle pulls and tears. It's just so clear that baseball does not require you to be a gym rat in that way, to be bench pressing 300 pounds all the time. I don't know. I find it interesting. It's the one sport where you can kind of get away with being a string bean, and there really aren't that many of them in today's game. And that's why you're seeing so many oblique pulls.
Well, Garlick did it in the batting cage, and he's not the first one. Guys have done it in BP. Pitchers have done it, just taking a deep breath. I mean, with hitters, there's so much trunk twisting. And I know that I work out with a trainer who I do core now because I don't play. But sometimes if I get in the off season where I get my core in good shape, sometimes I'll cramp up in my core muscles. And I always think, gosh, I wouldn't have wanted that when I was playing. So, you're doing a lot of this hitting. I know you want to be strong. It's all your body works together in concert, but there's a limit to it. And I don't think they have a handle on it yet. I really don't. I think they overdo it. And I mean, look at, you talk about Noah Syndergaard. Well, what about over in the Bronx with their two sluggers? They can't stay on the field.
Yeah, Judge and Stanton, they seem to really, so many muscular injuries, and they're both jacked, such strong guys. I just think there's a correlation there. And baseball players didn't used to look like that until really since the steroid era in the 90s and forward. It's the bodies of baseball players have changed, and there's been more muscle injuries. But anyway, we've gotten way off topic. Want to talk about some bad fundies, Keith. And I'm curious about, the Mets just have had issues with that this year. I mean, I go back to the birdie stolen base, and I was explaining this to somebody yesterday or the day before who was saying that, actually Keith has seemed frustrated with the quality of the play. And I was saying, well, I think the key word with you, Keith, is embarrassing, because I think that word used to mean something to you. And correct me if I'm wrong, when you were a player, if something happened that embarrassed you, that was like a look in the mirror moment. And the Mets have had a lot of those moments this year. And so what do you think, who's to blame for that? When McNeil's running when he shouldn't be, when, there's just things that happen daily with this team that get in the way of them winning games. Who's responsible?
Well, I don't know. I think that money has gotten in the way of the game, that you're going to make your big contract by hitting home runs. And you got all these baseball camps, and what are they teaching them? Are they just teaching them how to hit? Are they teaching them the fundamentals, how to run the bases? The base running is atrocious, and it's not just the Mets. It's epidemic. The sliding is absolutely, they don't know how to slide, a lot of people. I'm not saying all of them, and I don't want to be knocking the players. But there's certain things that are instinctual, and it just seems like, I was fortunate. I had a father that played, and we were taught all these things. And but I played with a lot of guys that knew how to play the game. With the Mets, it's something new every day. I mean, Conforto did last night with 2 outs, didn't run the ball out. He was lucky he can run. If he got thrown out, my God. Oh my goodness. And what was he thinking, not knowing there were 2 outs? McNeil on the sacrifice fly, runner on first and third. We didn't make a note of it because I just feel like I'm picking on everybody all the time. So I just let it go, but he threw a softball back to the third baseman. Well, if you feel that you haven't got a chance to throw out the runner, why are you throwing home? Well, the runner on first, throw second base. So it's just those little things. And the base running, I don't mind that they're struggling with men on scoring position. Those are physical things. They're trying, and it's obvious they're pressing. But the mental errors, and I think Luis Rojas has been pretty strong in expressing the displeasure of how the Mets have played. It's got to stop, and fortunately they got the Phillies with the worst bullpen, and they got in the bullpen. And in 30 years ago, Wheeler would have probably gone 9. Yeah. I would never want to give a game away to particularly that bullpen, but that's what the game is.
It was a great job by you guys in the truck last night, because we didn't see the reason that Conforto was almost out until you guys came back from break. And Gary said, by the way, if you were wondering why that play was so close, Conforto did not know there were 2 outs. And you said on the broadcast, you're like, if he had been thrown out, that was a play where he should have scored easily. And then this storyline would be bubbling even more than it already is.
Right.
So imagine, Keith, that you were one of these guys and you were having trouble sliding, you were having trouble on the base paths, just the fundamentals of the game, the fundies weren't there. Who do you think is to blame for that? Is it the players? Should we be yelling and screaming about Conforto and McNeil and their mistakes? Or is it the player development people that have been coaching them from really high school on?
I can't say one way or the other. I'm not down in the minor leagues watching what's going on. I'm sure there's instruction, but certain things are, can't be taught. You're supposed to know there's specific fundamentals on base running, but there are certain things that are instinctual. A lot of players I see don't have it. A lot of instincts. Coaches don't have the power today that they had in my day. Okay, you had the manager and the 5 coaches, and it was the captain, and then the coaches were the sergeants, and we were the privates that take orders, and they'd get on you if you screwed up. And they don't do that today. They don't have any power. I don't see any of that going on. And whether it's because I have no idea why.
I think it's money.
They can't take criticism. I don't know, or whatever. I have no clue. But I know that the coaches don't have the power that they used to have, and they should be respected. They're part of the coaching staff. We, as a player, you're under them.
Well, don't you think it's money, Keith? I mean, if the players are making 20 or 30 times what the manager is, I mean, the player wouldn't tell you they respect the manager any less. But I think it's a subconscious thing that, like, I feel like it has to be that the salary determines kind of where the respect lies.
Okay, someone making big money, but not everybody's making $20 million a year.
Yeah, that's true.
So I just think it's a generational thing. That's how we've advanced as a society. And I mean, how removed am I from this current generation of players in their 20s? I mean, I'm 40 something years older than them. If you're 20 years old, I got 48 years on you, almost 50 years. So that's 2 generations removed. So I just think it's where we progressed. And I can't put my finger on. And you know what? Baseball is a microcosm of society. I think it's our whole society that has advanced this far.
Don't you think you've talked about how you guys in the booth are a little loopy and it's been fun for us at home because of how weird the situation is? Don't you think the players are victim of that too? Like, don't you think it's easier to zone out when there's nobody in the ballpark? Don't you think it's easier to forget how many outs there are when the flow has just totally changed?
I agree. It would be very bizarre not to have fans. And I think we've noted before in past shows that we've come to the realization, I think the players have too, that how important the fans are in adding the excitement, get the adrenaline flowing. I think the players have gotten used to playing without it. I mean, they are playing for a playoff. Remarkably, the Mets are 22 and 27 as we're recording this, 5 games under 500, and they're only 2.5 back for the last spot. No one wants to really take the bull by the horns, and someone's going to back in. It seems like in the final 2 teams. So okay, yeah, there could be that lack of where do you have your concentration lapses, your mental mistakes. But you're playing for a postseason. I'll be personally glad when this season's over because this COVID season it's just off the charts, crazy. It's just so alien, and we need 162 games and get to a normal season. This has been a tough year for everybody. I mean, what Ramos said, it wasn't an excuse. I mean, Ramos I admire him. He's struggling. He's a professional. He has had a terrible year. He knows it. He's admitted it. He said it's eaten him up. And he's a family man. He loves his wife and kids, and he can't have him around. And I can appreciate that. And then we mentioned in the broadcast, and I just thought of it off the spur of the moment. And you're on the road, you can't even go out with your teammates. So what do you do after a game when you're quarantined and you're having a year like Alonso or a Ramos? you'd go out with the guys, have a beer and laugh and chuck, and forget about it. But what are you going to do? You got to go back to your room. Can't go anywhere. You're in four walls in a hotel. That on a full season, 60 games with 30 on the road, you don't have any outlet to get rid of your frustration. And I can understand him, going over and over in his head, because he wants to do well. He knows he's letting the team down, and it's really eating him up. So I'm glad he had that interview, because it brought a human element into this COVID season.
I think that's a really good point. And to your question, what do? You grip the bat tighter. I mean, that's just what Pete Alonso's done. How interesting was it? I think it was Ronnie. It might have been you, forgive me, Keith, last night when Pete comes to the plate as a pinch hitter. First of all, he's basically not the starting first baseman right now. Dom Smith is. Pete comes up and he's chewing gum. And everything looked so different about him and his body language. And but such a good point by you about Wilson Ramos. I thought that was an important point. And it's not, I think the cynical fan out there could say, you miss your family? How does that, how is that at all related to you missing a ball at home plate for a tag? And I think the bottom line is that, like you just said, you're pressing mentally. You have an outlet. Usually when you go home, you realize what's really important about life. And they don't have that right now. They go back to their hotel rooms or their apartments and they just think about what they did wrong. Even if you go 2 for 4, how'd you make those 2 outs? So that kind of goes well into our 3-batter rule. Let's start with Wilson Ramos, because he was one of the guys I wanted to talk about. But it's less about Ramos, Keith, and more about the catching situation. I mean, what do you think? Should they do an all-out pursuit of Real Muto? You have watched a lot of him behind the plate, and he is impressive. Do you think that should be priority number 1 for the Mets this offseason?
Well, they're going to need a catcher. I don't think Ramos will be back. He's going to be a year older, and Chirinos looks like a backup guy, so that's a need. I think a center fielder is also a need. Pitching's a need. There's a lot of work to be done here. Syndergaard's not going to be ready in April from the Tommy John, so you can't pencil him in the rotation early in the season. There's a lot to be done. I think there's going to be some changes, and we got new ownership. Let's take that into consideration. What is Mr. Cohn going to do? How hands-on is he going to be with the ball club? Will the general manager be back? They've got a new sheriff in town, so there's a lot of things up in the air going forward as to what direction this club is going to go. And we're getting close to the end of the year now, when you have the winter meetings towards the end of the year. I mean, do you reshuffle your front office? I don't know. So that's up to Mr. Cohen. So there's a lot of things that need to be done with this ball club. I think that Diaz has been a big plus. I think he's over the hump now. And I think that of all the players that have played this season, and I haven't mentioned this on the air, I think that Diaz has been helped more by no fans than anybody else on the Met team, because he struggled in the beginning a little bit, and then he would have been booed. You don't know if that would have exacerbated his mental issues.
We talked about this. You and I talked about this last week.
Okay, we did. Okay. So I think he's over the hump now. So I don't get rid of him. He's my closer going forward. He shut it down last night. Boom, boom, boom. So he's got great stuff, and I think he's over it now. I think that he's the man. So we got a legitimate closer, and that's important.
I'm glad you brought up Steve Cohen, because, and for anybody who's listening who got through the first, whatever it's been, 20 minutes of this and was like, I cannot believe they haven't mentioned ownership, forgive me. But what's so funny is I watch these games, and like you said earlier, Keith, they're in a race for the wild card, and I get caught up in the day-to-day and the game-by-game stuff. And I earlier this week would have thought, oh my gosh, the ownership stuff's going to dominate the podcast Thursday. But then you watch the games and you get caught up in that. So an incredibly crucial point. The Mets really have a new owner. We'll see if it gets approved in November. Sounds like it will. And also, to your point, he could Jerry Jones this. I mean, we don't know. He's a huge Met fan. So if you become the owner of the team that you watch every night, you might want full control. So the new owner could come in and say, here's what I want to do. We don't know how involved he's going to be. We don't know if Brody will be around. We don't know what the team will look like. So it is too early to talk about things like JT Realmuto in terms of what the catching position should look like. But at the same time, I think if Brody's still the GM, he must have realized by now the mistake that he made by signing him. Not that he's been terrible in all facets of the game. He's a very good hitter with runners in scoring position. But I think they need a more consistent guy behind the plate defensively than they've had with him.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's something that has to be addressed in the offseason. That in center field, and you never have enough pitching. That's all there is to it. Pitching's the name of the game. It always will be. It will overshadow all your other weaknesses if you guys can go out there and pitch. And we got to somehow improve our defense too. Our defense has not been good. This has never been a real good defensive ball club over the years. This past decade, not been a good defensive team. So if you have good pitching, you want good defense. So there's just a lot of things that have to be addressed. So, how much money does Mr. Cohen is he gonna be like George Steinbrenner? Who knows? Is he gonna write a blank check for Brody? Go here's a blank check. Go get these guys. We'll see.
By the way, as you're making this point, it just should be noted for the record, Haji is like borderline asleep on your shoulder.
He's drooling on my shoulder.
So you got to Diaz, a perfect pivot to our next in the 3-batter rule. So you are saying, I know we talked about it last week, and I mentioned to you the idea that no fans in the ballpark might have helped him because you blow a save in Queens and you give up a big home run at Yankee Stadium, and you pointed out that that's a tough atmosphere, even if it's 20 or 30%
Sure.
Mets fans. So how do you? I mean, he has solidified the closing role in the matter of like 2 weeks. I mean, is this a big enough sample size, in your opinion, to mean that that's your guy moving forward?
Well, I can certainly see by his stuff why he had the big year in Seattle. And I talked to Ed Lynch, who was scouting back then, and he just said this guy's got electric stuff, and we're seeing it now. I mean, he's got a really, really, really good slider, and he throws hard. So to me, it was all mental coming here, and expectations, new organization. He's a young guy too. He's you got control of him. And he's a young guy that's going to stick around and be your guy for a long time, So I just see what he's got going on. I watch, and he's got more than a passing grade with me, of my observations.
Another guy we haven't, we did this with Brandon Nimmo with Andy earlier in the week, but I want to get your take on JD Davis. We haven't talked about him all that much this year. Last year, he was kind of a revelation. He's been solid offensively. I think defensively, we're still trying to figure out where he's best, but I think third base is obviously the position he's played consistently. What do you think about the year he's having? What impression has he made on you in 2020?
Well, number one, I want to make one point. This season right here, this COVID season, this shortened season, it's hard to evaluate a player, going forward, because it's so bizarre, such a layoff. Some guys are doing great, some guys aren't. Does that mean? I mean, look at Cody Bellinger. He's hitting like 215. Yeah. It's hard to make an evaluation going forward with how this with this season. As far as JD's concerned, he's very disciplined. He had a big night. I mean, he was the reason why the Mets, big reason why they won the second game of the series. He drove into 3 runs. The 2-run homer was huge. He's very disciplined at the plate. He knows what he likes, and he knows what he doesn't like. The league has kind of found out what he doesn't like, and he's got to learn to lay off that. And because he is blind in one spot, he's got a big hole. But what I found is, you can't put it there all the time. And if you take it where his hole is, it's a hole where the umpires don't call a lot of strikes upstairs. They don't call that high strike, a lot of them. And learn the discipline to take that pitch. He likes that ball out over the plate down. He's always looking to right center field. The ball he pulls is always the breaking ball or the changeup, which is a lot slower in velocity, so he can get the barrel out. I would like to see him learn and work on looking in occasionally, and maybe he does. I haven't seen it, and just look inside and learn how to pull that ball. And then once the pitchers see that, then they're going to go, oh my God, I can't get in there anymore. I better be careful. And then they're going to go back to his strength. So it's always a cat and mouse game. I mean, if you hit one way, and you've got a hole, they're going to find it. And if you don't make the adjustments, then, the pitchers can't put it where they want all the time. And you can wait all you want into your strength, you'll get it, which he does. But if he learns to look in, I had to do it off left-handers, where I learned to look in. And was told by the late Lou Brock, even if you pull it foul and pull it hard, the pitcher says, that's my best fastball, and he pulled it foul. Holy cow, I can't get in there anymore. So they go away. Then you got him going into your strength. And I think the same thing plays not only for JD. I think no one likes the ball in. The toughest pitch to hit is up and in for anybody, unless you're a dead pull hitter. All the great hitters love to extend their hands, all hitters. And when you get rushed inside, that's something you got to combat. So he's not alone in that. And people have learned to combat it and, learn to look in. And I think will be a progression for him, hopefully. I'm glad that Chili Davis is the hitting coach. I'm really pleased about that. Really unfortunate that he can't be with the team. He's working with them, from Arizona on Zoom. It's too bad he's not here. I think he's really made a big difference with our hitters. I really do. I think a lot of it from last year, from what I saw. So hopefully he's back next year. He will be back. No reason why not, but he'll be there in uniform on the field with these guys.
JD, it's been an important, solid season for him. The OPS is over 800, like you said, a huge night last night. So I think
you wouldn't know it. It's very quiet.
Right.
I mean,
it's sneaky.
He's been steady. He really hasn't had a hot streak in a while.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of waiting for him to get hot, and it would be the right time right now with 11 games left. Be perfect. I mean, we got so many left-hand hitters, and we're stacking all those left-hand hitters in the lineup. And really, the way he's been swinging, I would prefer him to be down in the lineup. But we haven't got a right-hand hitter to go up in the lineup with Alonso struggling.
But it's good that
he's
hasn't
in the
gotten
third
hot.
hole, and he's going to be there. And we need him to get hot. If he gets hot in that third hole, then that's going to, with the two left-handers up front above him and then two behind him, and he gets hot in the middle of that, it's going to make a big difference.
But it's good for his future that he hasn't gotten hot, and yet the numbers are still good. I mean, because maybe he will, that will help the Mets win this year. But for him personally,
he's stayed very disciplined. He doesn't show a lot of emotion, but I can see that he doesn't like to make outs. Who doesn't? But I see someone that's very focused on what he's doing at the plate. And he hasn't lost confidence. He's getting his hits, but I'm ready just to see him. Everybody gets in a tear where you just get raging hot, and he hasn't had that yet. But that's because of this doggone 60-game season. Yeah, I guarantee if it was 162 games, we'd only be going into June, and he would find a hot streak.
Yeah. Speaking of this weird season, on this date in Mets history, September 17th, 1986, back when it was even harder to make the playoffs, the 86 Mets, your 86 Mets, clinched the National League East, booked a trip to the NLCS on this day. The expanded playoffs, Keith, they may be here to stay, maybe not to the extent that they are expanded in 2020. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't like it. It's we were talking with Gary and Ronnie before the game yesterday when the commissioner came out and said a lot of the owners are like this new playoff. Well, 16 teams out of 30, over half, then it just kind of makes the regular season not as important. There's just too many teams getting in. Keep it the way it was with the wild card, and there's a fight for the wild card, and most of the teams get lopped off, but they're in it, and only two can go forward. I I hope they go back to the old format.
One of the things that I know they're going to change, at least if they're smart, would be to make sure that the division winners and the teams with the best records get rewarded for it. I mean, the Dodgers have to play a 3-game series with the 8 seed. That doesn't make any sense. They should be rewarded for being the best team in the National League and at least get a bye. And, home field advantage means nothing. So you're in a 3-game series, you might lose. For right now, it doesn't make much sense. And I agree with the reasons that you just stated. All right, we are out of time, Keith, but this has been great as always. We will talk again next week. Please, a reminder, subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts if you can. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good weekend.